There are a few of us physicians that have become financial planners and even taken it up a notch, like myself, to become a CFP. It's a unique perspective. And I think we have some unique skills that translate wonderfully to the financial planning industry. And often I'll slip in a polite manner, and I'll call my clients patients. And I'm treating my patient. And that's a very different perspective. But in reality, that's what I'm doing. I'm out there helping people. I'd be working a shift in the ED, and in between patients, they're like, what do you think about this investment? Or what should I do with my 401k? And for years and years, it gave me so much joy to help people with this, even though I wasn't getting paid. It was just kind of a side, at that point, volunteer gig, but I enjoyed it. And they would say, geez, if you were not an emergency physician, you would be the best financial planner. And I'm thinking, what are you, crazy? I'm an emergency physician. I had an epiphany one day that I wanted to master the intersection of wealth, health, and happiness, which has become my slogan. Okay. And when thinking about those three intersections, I mean, most financial planners are thinking about mastering wealth and investments. And for me, as the doctor and the person that I'm not doing this for necessarily to make big bucks or earn a large salary, I'm doing it to help people.
You just heard Jeff Weintraub share how he went from saving lives in the ER to saving people's financial futures, and why mastering the intersection of health, wealth, and happiness became his mission. In this episode, we go deeper into what it really takes to reinvent yourself after decades in one profession, how to build a solo business from scratch without losing your sanity, and why true financial freedom is about designing a life you love and not waiting until retirement to live it. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil Vaish, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest spent 25 years being the person you called when it was life or death, and now he's the person you call about your retirement. Meet Dr. Jeff Finance, who traded full-time medicine for full-time financial planning without losing his stethoscope. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nikhil, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to share my story to hopefully help others.
Well, you have a fascinating story, Jeff, with lots of twists and turns. I'm going to dive right into it. Now, so let me start by asking you, when you look back at your time at Cornell, being the pre-med kid, working shifts in a French bread pizza truck, and even designing your own major, do you see any early signals that you had this itch to do things differently, even in highly structured environments like academics and later in medicine?
So I've always had a desire since I'm a child to help people. I loved my 10th grade AP bio course, loved science, loved math. And my dad was a CPA, so I also had an interest in finance, although I never saw myself as an accountant in the future. It was really a great pediatrician growing up, and then my 10th grade AP bio teacher kind of propelled me with the desire to, what's the best way to help people? Let's be a doctor. But always in the back of my mind, I had other interests, and personal finance was one of them, probably, due to the base from the information and exposure I had with my dad's tax practice. And I would help my dad with his tax practice over time. And I always thought in the back of my mind, if I wasn't in a job which I loved, I could always pivot to something else.
You were clearly ahead of your time, Jeff, because our generation was told to pick a lane and stay in it, right? I remember, because that's kind of the advice our parents gave us, because that's kind of what they did, right? And that blueprint did change, though. But so let me fast forward now to a little bit, right? So for 25 years, you were Dr. Weintraub, the person people called when it was literally life or death, as I said a minute ago. Then you became Dr. Jeff Finance. Now, who people call about retirement planning. But that's a massive shift, right? In terms of how you matter to people. So just walk me through that transition. Was there any grief in letting go of the identity, or did it feel like a natural evolution?
So it felt like a natural evolution, and I do still practice some emergency medicine, so I didn't entirely let go.
Yeah.
And, after many years of practicing emergency medicine, I thought it was the greatest job in the world. But after 25 plus years, I felt like it was time for a new challenge. I wasn't burned out. I still loved my job, but it was just time for a change, something that would let me apply all the skills I had in a different way while continuing to learn, to grow, maximize my own potential. But I wanted to continue with my lifetime goal of helping people, especially under high stakes, situations, but in a way that offered more flexibility and balance to my life. And without the nights, the weekends, the holidays, the evenings, typical in a life as an emergency physician. So, really, it's more about embracing a new chapter rather than walking away from the previous one.
Right. And yeah, like you said, you still volunteer. I mean, you still, oh, you do shifts, right? At
Right.
the ER, and you haven't hung up your stethoscope, so to speak. So you looked at joining a corporate firm, but then decided to go solo, right? So what kept you up at night during that time? Sort of what sort of fears did you have to push through in making that decision?
So, when I decided it was time to make the jump and shift from full time emergency medicine to occasional emergency medicine with full time financial planning, I looked into many different avenues. And coming through the medical training, it was just a known thing that you go through medical school, then you do residency training where you learn your specialty, and then you're out in the world. So I kind of figured it was, every specialty, and I'm not saying just within medicine, but within all professions, you really should go through a residency. And I figured if I need to go through a residency to become a financial planner, I probably should join a firm where I could get my feet wet and learn the systems and understand, how to work in that industry, just
Yeah.
like residency in medicine. As I progressed through, Nikhil, what I realized is based on the skills and the knowledge that I had, and I had gone back for an MBA probably about 5 or 6 years before I began to make the pivot to financial planning. So I had a lot of the skills and I'd read up on it quite a bit. I followed a bunch of different podcasts, lots of different books. And what I realized is I found a mentor who pointed me in the direction of you can totally do this yourself. And you don't need to go back into the corporate realm,
Hmm.
and it will offer you so much more flexibility and freedom to be able to build your practice and do it the way you really wanted to do it.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing how many solopreneurs I've talked to who sort of got that nudge, because even if you're doing it as a side hustle, it's quite a leap to give up that full-time security of a job, right? And then dive into something without the guarantee of that paycheck. So, it takes, and so many times people have told me that it was somebody who came who believed in them before they believed in themselves in terms of being able to turn that into, a new revenue stream. Um,
Right. No, I mean, for many years, and because I
yeah,
had the interest in personal
right.
finance, I'd have so many friends, I'd have different colleagues. They'd constantly be asking me questions. I'd be working a shift in the ED, and in between patients, they're like, what do you think about this investment? Or what should I do with my 401k? And for years and years, it gave me so much joy to help people with this, even though I wasn't getting paid. It was just kind of a
Yeah.
side, at that point, volunteer gig, but I enjoyed it. And they would say, geez, if you were not an emergency physician, you would be the best financial planner. And I'm thinking, what are you, crazy? I'm an emergency physician. Until I finally realized it was time for the new challenge. But it's kind of interesting how that morphed.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think that's the trick with the side hustle, right? Because most people, and I had a guest on recently who told me that, when as you're making your leap, figure out the superpower that you think is really simple, but people are like, "Oh my God, like I would pay for this skill that you have," right? And to you it was just fun and something you did on the side to even unwind, right? Because I do know you
It,
read financial books on the side, and
no, exactly. I'd come home from a difficult shift in the emergency department, and I would, open up a financial planning book or log into an Excel spreadsheet. And my wife would say, "What are you doing? Why are you looking at an Excel spreadsheet? It's so complex." I'm like, this is my release from the shift in the emergency department. I just loved it so much. And now it's become a profession. I couldn't be any luckier that now
Yeah.
it's my full-time thing.
Well, you made the leap. I always say, until you make the leap, the net will not appear, right? So
Very
now,
true.
the other interesting thing is that you didn't just pivot careers, right? You taught yourself regulatory filings, you built your own website, you even launched your business without consultants, right? So what did you what let me ask you, what did the process reveal about your strengths and also your blind spots as you went through this transition?
Right. So I think my strengths, when I set my mind to something and I focus on it, I don't give up. And listen,
Good.
that was a trait that helped me and continues to help me as an emergency physician for many, many years.
Yeah.
Patients would be appreciative. I can't quite figure out the diagnosis. This medicine didn't work. Let's go with another one. And it's the same idea with building a solo business,
Yeah.
in that I was just all in on trying to figure out how to do it. And one of my concerns about hiring consulting firms, and listen, I needed to, you know, become, approved after I took my Series 65 exam. I needed to be approved as a registered investment advisor in the state, and then eventually it would be the SEC. But typically, even solo firms, they use these very expensive consulting firms because the consulting firms paint the picture that it's a complex process and there's no way anyone would ever do it themselves.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I'm in New York State, and I reached out directly to the New York State regulatory people, and I spoke with this wonderful staff person, and she said, "You don't need one of these firms. Let me walk you through the paperwork." And I'm like, "You are perfect for me." And I built my entire plan essentially for the business, at least all of the stuff they needed for the what's called the ADV form in financial planning. I built it all myself. And it took a lot of time, but instead of using a cookie cutter template from a consulting firm, not to mention paying them thousands of dollars for this, I built it my way, which was my focus the whole time. This was my firm, not just another firm that they would fit into their cookie cutter template with a few personalizations. I kind of built from the ground up, which is something, if people have the time and resources and they're devoted to it, I would recommend people do that, because then the business is truly all about you. And that's the whole reason you don't join other people or join a larger firm. It said, what your question was, weaknesses. Well,
Yeah.
listen,
Blind spots.
I blind spots. I had no idea about, if I'm a solo firm, I have to be the IT person. I have to be the compliance person. I thought it, I really didn't think about it, but I'm like, wait, there are many aspects to the business, and I needed to learn this as I went along. I was excited to help my clients, achieve financial freedom and maximize life fulfillment. But in order to do that with my solo business, there were many other hats I needed to wear. That was a blind spot, which I learned as I went.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of those, but I have to say you're like a one man industry destroyer, right? You just wrecked the consulting industry's model, which I agree with. Also, the website designers are probably sitting there lamenting that you sort of figured that out too. But you're right, though. That is part of, and that's also a part of the DNA of people who start solo businesses. I find there is an innate curiosity and a thirst to learn new things, right? Which is a good thing as long as you don't end up going down rabbit holes, right? So you just need to know enough to get what you need to get done. But I always think about it as, if it's not a skill that you're learning that you can charge for, then you don't want to spend like 10,000 hours, as I think Malcolm Gladwell said, right, learning it, because then then it becomes a distraction. Um, so the other thing I want to talk about now is sort of a nice pivot to, well, actually, before that, I want to ask you, was there a moment in your journey where you thought this might not work? And how did you push through that after you made the leap?
I think because I moved into it slowly and I
Yeah.
gradually assimilated into it, I did not have that moment.
Okay. Which
And
is, yeah.
in terms of success, I thankfully, over time and slowly moving into the industry, until I finally pulled the trigger and said, that's it for full-time emergency medicine. But I already had the cogs in the wheel moving when I pulled that trigger. So I think that gave me a certain sense of security to be able to jump. And a tip I would give people is take it slowly. You don't just jump off a cliff and hope that the parachute will open. And I built a bit of a financial cushion, so there wasn't that much stress to, oh my goodness, I better get X number of clients within Y number of months or else this will fail. I had the mindset that this will develop over time, and I needed to be patient with the process. So thankfully I did not have that, but I think I thought ahead when I was developing the business, thinking I'm going to have some slow years. I'm ready for it as
Yeah,
I'm growing.
that is excellent advice, and you're right. One of the things I tell people now is that use your paycheck as venture capital to invest in the business you want to build, and do it slowly, like you said. Put the training wheels on, sort of test the waters. Get a few clients under your belt, build your confidence, and make sure you have a runway and a cushion, because it takes time. These things don't happen overnight. As much as social media might try to tell you otherwise. There is no such thing as overnight success, I tell people. So, if you build it, they will not come. That's my pet phrase now. So,
I agree.
brilliantly done. So let's talk a little bit about branding now. So you rely on referrals, but every referral engine needs a spark, right? So walk me through how you landed your first 5 clients when you had sort of zero track record as Dr. Jeff Finance officially. I know you were sort of testing the waters while you were still working, but talk to us a little bit about that.
So yes, you're correct that I really haven't marketed. At some point in the future, I might decide to. I have avoided social media with
Yeah.
positives and negatives, but as of now, I've avoided it. Although people have suggested, why don't you just do, free TikTok videos for people, educating them? And that could be in my future, because ultimately, I just want to help people and I love teaching. But as of right now, I've kind of avoided that angle. I had an epiphany one day that I wanted to master the intersection of wealth, health, and happiness, which
Yeah.
has become my slogan.
Okay.
And when thinking about those three intersections, I mean, most financial planners are thinking about mastering wealth and
Right.
investments. And for me, as the doctor and the person that I'm not doing this for necessarily to make big bucks, earn a large salary. I'm doing it to help people. I wanted to inject the health and the wealth. And as a
Mm-hmm.
practicing physician, I have expertise with health, and I understand how the wealth and the happiness can affect the health. And each of those things has a unique connection. So that's kind of my motto. In terms of the first 5 clients, they kind of rolled in just with people now knowing, oh, Jeff's not doing full-time emergency medicine anymore. Hey, now he's actually, you know, doing financial planning, which we recommended he should have done years ago, but I was an emergency physician full time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it really happened effortlessly, which was wonderful, which that's not typical in this industry, in this solo industry. I was very lucky for that to happen. And then as my first few clients rolled in, now things began to snowball. And each of those clients, they were apparently happy with me and they told other people, and that's how the practice has been growing. So
Well,
so far, no formal marketing. It's just the word of mouth. And I do things differently from most financial planning firms.
yeah, no, and we'll come back and touch on the social media piece, but I want to put a slightly different spin on what you just said, which is it didn't, I would disagree that it happened effortlessly, because you were already doing the job while you were working full time. It's not like you were you were cutting corners in terms of the people you were helping. You were helping them 100% the way you would help somebody if they were paying you, right? So you were already building the reputation, you were building the muscle, and you were frankly doing the job before you actually started charging for it and turning it into a business. So you'd already built a reputation, a stellar reputation, right? So I think to be fair, you did the work, you put in sort of the, the time and effort for that launch to be smooth. Would
That
you
is
agree?
great perspective. Thank you. But no, based on what you just said, that makes sense and very true. But for me, I wasn't actually putting in effort. It just happened naturally, which is what's so fascinating about it, which is why I failed to see that perspective of it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's why you're on the show. So now let me ask you though. You said something interesting about your health, wealth, and happiness, right? So if someone looked at your brand when you started versus today, what's the biggest shift they'd notice, and how did you sort of land on that positioning? Was it an aha moment, or was it a natural evolution? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think it was a natural evolution. I owe it, and my focus, and although that's the motto, my focus always on maximizing life fulfillment and
Yeah.
and happiness. And we only get one run at this. And as an emergency physician, I've seen lots of situations where it's, some people would call it the other guy in quotes. And if people aren't familiar with that idea, bad things can happen, and they can happen unexpectedly, and you never know when it will happen. And I'm
Right.
not trying to be negative, but
Yeah.
that means before those things actually happen, maximize life and really put your all into it and pursue happiness and design your life in such a way that you can pursue happiness. I have another phrase that is well published. Do what you love and you won't work a day in your life, when I'm speaking with my clients, but I've been talking about this for 40 years. And it's the idea of, if you're not doing something you love, let's pivot out and try to find to do something we love. Or if you're doing something you don't love and you're unable to pivot, at least recognize that that is a tool to allow you to still maintain and maximize happiness. Because it's not always possible to do something you love in your job space, but it is possible to maximize life fulfillment either as part of that job or outside of that job. And I think that's important to keep that in mind. You just never know when life will throw you a curveball, and wow, I shouldn't have waited to have taken that trip, to have, written that book, to have started my own solo business.
Yeah.
Live in the now, obviously smartly, and you don't want to blow all your money from a financial perspective. Plan for the future, but don't give up the present to maximize the future. You want to maximize both.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And because so many people feel like they're trapped, right? So I love the way you just described it. And also, I think the other thing which is really interesting to me is people don't pick up on those little cues, right? Like, I love how you were like, you'd come home from probably one of the toughest jobs in the world is being an ER physician. I know a few. So I know that's, it's not an easy job. So, and then thank you for your service. I always tell doctors that too. But, to come home and open a spreadsheet after a day like this, there's a clue right there, right? That, I mean, and people, I think, don't really absorb things like that. After you have a tough day, what are you doing? Because you could have your superpowers could be sitting right under your nose, right, without you realizing it. So, and I agree. And it's like, and if you are trapped, then, or trapped rather than, I think it's more of a mindset than sort of that, the physical reality of being trapped. And there's always an escape route, right? There always is. You just have to figure out how to smartly use it, as you said.
Correct.
So pricing is something every solopreneur agonizes over. How did you figure out what to charge? And what would you tell someone who's sort of paralyzed trying to set their first fee?
So I would recommend, in any solo industry, not just financial planning, and then I will tell you my perspective on financial planning, make sure your fees support your clients. It's all about the people and the clients feeling as though they are receiving appropriate value.
Right.
It's not about supporting your bottom line or your metrics, because you'll never meet them if your clients realize this isn't worth the value. In financial planning, well over 95% of traditional financial planners charge what's called a percent assets under management fee,
Yeah. Yeah.
where their clients have, say, 1 million in assets, and they say, we're going to charge you 1% of your assets. And that's $10,000 a year. And then if they have 10 million in assets, now they're charging $100,000 a year.
Right.
One might question, is that $100,000 for the person that has 10 million worth it? Especially if the person that has 1 million is only paying $10,000.
Yeah.
I had a problem with that. There were many different conflicts of interest related to that. It was never in an advisor's, it still is not in an advisor's best interests, if they want to maximize their own bottom line, to recommend that a client spend their money, go buy the vacation home, go give away half of your estate, because you can do, if you have charitably inclined, you don't need $10 million. Give away 5 million of it today. Don't wait until you're no longer around and you die. Do it today to make the greatest impact. And now you will see the benefits of it.
Yeah.
But that's a conflict of interest with
Right.
an assets under management model. That advisor's fee just dropped $50,000 if the value of their portfolio dropped from 10 million to 5 million.
True.
Or even from 1 million to 500,000, whatever the numbers are, it doesn't matter the number of zeros there. There's a definite conflict of interest. And I think that compromises my strongest thought of maximizing happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Spend your money. And, there's a book, Die with Zero,
Yeah.
which is kind of a hot book lately. And I recommend everyone read it, because it gives perspective of, and I've said this before, but live life to the fullest and get those experiences now.
Yeah.
There's a time to save, and you have to appropriately save, but don't hold that money around until later. And a flat fee model, which is what I have, and I personalize it for each client based on the amount of work and effort I expect to do. And if I'm off on that estimation, that's the fee. It's not like a typical attorney fee where it's hourly based. If I go over the hours, it's still a flat fee. But this way, the client can measure value, and it's an expected fee that they are aware of. And there's no vested interest in me trying to convince them to not spend it down. And in fact, I encourage them to spend it down, because it's all about happiness. And money is a tool to promote life fulfillment and happiness. And it's important to remember that. So that's kind of my fee structure. But again, for all industries, focus on the people, your clients, and make sure it's delivering good value.
Yeah, no, I love that advice, because I think even in our industry, one of the things I stay away from is there's a tendency to create dependency, right? So people come in and then they want like a monthly ongoing fee for not really creating any value other than just collecting money. And I always hated that, because I'm like, one of my goals is I want you to be self-sufficient when you're done with me, not dependent for the rest of your life or however long it may be. So that's something. So, and I completely agree with you. And I think the other thing that seems counterintuitive is if you focus on providing value to your clients, they will pay you, right? They will pay you what you want, whatever your model in terms of your fee structure based on your costs, etc. Obviously, you shouldn't be making a loss because you're a business, but the difference is not price gouging, right? Or trying to actually just focus on the money. So I think that's really good advice and worth for solopreneurs listening in. I think it's a great way to sort of think about how you price yourself. So you're essentially competing against big financial firms with massive marketing budgets and many independent financial advisors, right? There are a lot of them out there. So, and you've touched on some of these, but let me ask you more pointedly, if someone offered you a national spotlight to tell the world what makes you different as a financial advisor, how would you pitch it? You talked about the different components.
Right. I think it goes back to my motto,
Yeah.
mastering the intersection of wealth, health, and happiness.
Right.
There are a few of us physicians that have become financial planners and even taken it up a notch, like myself, to become a CFP. But it's a unique perspective. And I think we have some unique skills that translate wonderfully to the financial planning industry. And, often I'll slip in a polite manner, and I'll call my clients patients. And I'm treating my patient. And that's a very different perspective. But in reality, that's what I'm doing. I'm out there helping people.
Yeah.
And as a solo firm, I'm able to focus on just helping people. And I don't have any of the corporate, umbrella rules to follow. And that's what makes me unique in terms of comparing with other, solo financial advisors. And there are others out there. As long as they are trying to maximize happiness for their clients, I don't look at myself as being in competition with them. I want to help as many people as possible. I hope they can help as many people as possible, as I can't do it all myself because I don't intend to grow beyond a certain level. I want to maintain the idea of a boutique practice. And that means at some point I will reach a maximum number of clients. I haven't yet reached it because I am comfortable and I feel as though I can devote appropriate amounts of time to be able to do a deep dive and really get to know all of my clients. But I'm sure I will reach the point where I realize I've reached my limit, but that's great. There are other advisors out there practicing similarly. So I think it's an easy sell, frankly.
Yeah, no, it is. But I think what's interesting to me is that it's almost like the mindset that you bring from helping, save lives, literally, to helping people. It feels very different from, the way you're sort of groomed in the corporate world, for lack of a better word, because that is much more focused on the bottom line, right? It's almost like that's first, and like you just mentioned, the fee model itself is flawed when you break it down like that. Even I'm sitting now and thinking, I need to give my financial advisors a call. I'm like, wait a minute, this, putting it that way. But I think, do people actually pick up on that difference? Because I think that's a massive differentiator in terms of your brand and your approach. The fact that you've taken the Hippocratic Oath even is like, there's a layer there that I think nobody else, your competitors, can't really lay claim to.
Right. No, that's true. But CFPs, certified financial planners, do take a fiduciary duty.
Right. Yeah.
And it's supposed to be client first. Now, I would argue most CFPs with a percent assets under management, that's an uncapped model. Yeah. Percent assets under management that's capped, that's more ethical. But I would say that might not always be ethical, which is, listen, they're still CFPs and supposed to be following fiduciary duty. And, is there a gray area there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it feels like there might be.
There might be.
Yeah, exactly. So let's come back and talk a little bit about social media, right? Now, you deliberately stay off Instagram, TikTok, and most other social platforms. And I think you mentioned to me, it keeps your mind fresh, right? But seeing your competitors sort of building audiences on those platforms, do you ever feel like you're missing out?
I do not. Although, again, I might change my mind in the future.
Yeah.
I don't think of myself as having competitors because I feel as though I offer such a unique brand.
Yeah.
Now, getting my brand out there, that's a different story. Could social media benefit my practice? It's possible. I haven't yet embraced it. There are many negatives of social media, which I won't get into here, and you've covered them on some of your previous podcasts. But I, as I mentioned earlier, I could see a situation where I'm spreading the word and simply educating without even looking for clients. And I think social media and in turn, I might end up getting some clients, but it's more important for me to educate people and to save them from buying, these, variable universal life insurance policies, for example, that are just not good for the client, and they're very good for the person that sells it and the insurance company and their shareholders.
Yeah.
And their products to be sold and not purchased. But, I think I could help people via social media on a much larger perspective, teaching people about things like that and, save when you're young and compounding interest. There are just so many different aspects of it. Have liability protection with an umbrella policy once you start developing assets, and, don't build up credit card debt. I mean, there are just so many different little pearls that I think at some point I might end up getting out there, but as of right now, I'm not comfortable using it as a marketing scheme because I feel as though it's this never ending
Hamster
treadmill
wheel.
that doesn't
Yeah, it is.
stop.
Absolutely. But it's interesting though, because I agree with you. And here's the dirty little secret, right? If you can have a referral business, you don't need social media, right? It's this crutch that has been created. And also, I agree with you. I think the way I look at social media, I mean, it's all about, if you look at the way it functions, it's very much self-aggrandizement, right? It's like a soapbox and everyone's talking about I, me, and myself, if you break it down. But I look at it a little differently in terms of actually what you just talked about, right? Because for me, Dr. Jeff would be providing value. You wouldn't be out there pitching or promoting. You would be sort of educating people on the things you just talked about, right? That's the way I think of, brand building. And that also keeps your referral business going because you're sort of creating value out there. You're still helping people. And that's what your brand does, right? So I agree. I think that's the way I would imagine you using social media rather than, the way maybe a lot of competitors use it, which is
Right.
come to me. Here's why I'm the best. So you figured out in 3 days what consultants said would take months, right? You mentioned that a few minutes ago. So what's your process when you hit a problem you've never solved before?
So I do research, and
Yep.
that comes from my days of being in medicine, especially in emergency medicine, which
Yeah.
as an emergency physician, I am the expert on the acute management of everything. That's every possible specialty in medicine. I have to be the expert on the acute management.
Yeah.
And there's no way to know everything, especially as medicine evolves and as different, and in the financial planning industry, as different laws, and I mean, constantly the tax laws are changing and different regulations. But I've always learned to do research.
Hmm.
And I think there are, over time, and I look back 30 years ago when I was in medical school, it wasn't nearly as efficient or easy to do research. There really
Yeah.
wasn't a worldwide web that we could use widely with all of the information and to perform searches. And now over the last few years, AI, and there are some powerful AI tools. I think we need to be careful with them, but I think that's one tool we can use to research different things. For example, ChatGPT, I will play with it sometimes, and I'm always questioning the validity of what it presents.
Hmm.
But at least it gives you a base that you can then go and further investigate or look at those sources and really do your own peer review by yourself to get the answers. But I think there are times where internet searches and AI can help you at least get a base in doing that research.
Yeah. True. True. And you're right. I mean, as much as we have access to technology, there's also, you have to sort of be careful about how you use it, and especially with AI, right? I mean, I use AI in a lot of things that I do, but I always say, don't ask AI what to do, tell AI what to do, right? And like you said, it can get you maybe 70-80% of the way there if you spend enough time with it. It's not a search tool, right? It's not, you type in a question and voila, you get an answer. You have to check it, you have to go back and forth with it. So how have you did mention you use AI to help with document development and your business setup, right? So can you talk a little bit about how you've integrated technology and how do you leverage it as a solopreneur in your business?
Yes, AI is more of a minor thing, but for example, when I was developing some of the documents that I submitted, to become an RIA, I would develop the document and then plug it into AI and see what it said. It had some nice thoughts, some thoughts that I disagreed with, and then
Yep.
did a little deeper digging. But in terms of technology, I am utilizing um, some professional tax
Software.
software,
Yeah.
but more importantly is a different platform, which is financial planning software.
Hmm.
And the financial planning software, when I was first starting out, because I loved Excel so much and I was very skilled in it, I figured, you know what, I'm going to build this myself. And I built a very powerful, unbelievably complex spreadsheet
Yeah.
that gave me nearly everything I needed.
Wow.
Now, that
Yeah.
being said, things change. And what I realized, it was taking so many hours to keep this thing going. That
Right.
was not worth it. And now I needed to make an investment in professional software that did it for me. And that's where, I picked certain things where I said, nope, this is not a do-it-yourself thing anymore. I
Yeah.
tried that, it worked, but it's too much of a time suck, and I need to focus more on my clients. And this tool has much nicer graphics, and it just does a whole bunch of projections. Is it as perfect and robust as my own spreadsheet? Most of the time, but I do miss a few aspects of it, but it's worth the sacrifice because I need to make sure I'm being efficient because it's just me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. That's a very valuable lesson. I think sometimes you have to learn it by doing it, right? Because I was going to ask you, how do you, how do you decide which new skills to learn yourself versus outsource? And it sounds like that was a lesson you learned, but you have a process for deciding that, or a filter?
Right. So, and this goes back to also to your question of what happens when you're not sure about something or when you don't
Yeah.
know something. Not only am
Research.
I doing research, but I also have developed a very nice network of other advisors where, I will have meetups with them, usually virtually, but sometimes in person. And we'll have some, emails back and forth. Hey, I have this client with this. What would you do with this? Or what do you think of the new tax law? And it's very nice to, be able to share ideas with each other to fill in any gaps or strengthen any knowledge on topics that we're not possibly not seeing as frequently.
Yeah.
But in terms of where do we go with certain technologies, the specific financial planning software that I chose was a result of different online discussions with other
Hmm.
advisors and hearing their experience and then trying it out myself and saying, you nailed it. That is the best one for my needs. So
Yeah.
it's
And I
helpful
think
to have that network.
I agree. And I call it finding your tribe, right? Because inevitably somebody's used something that you may not be aware of that may be of value to you. So find people who are doing similar things or the same things on this journey. And obviously, I think financial services is a much more heavily regulated industry too, right? So you have to be careful about using AI, I'm sure. And so is medicine. So you're probably, pretty used to making sure that those things are taken care of. Um, the other thing which is interesting to me is that you built a business now where you pick your own schedule for the first time in decades, right? So how did you structure your days and weeks as you were building this?
So that freedom is so amazingly liberating and hugely contributes to happiness and life fulfillment.
Yeah.
As an emergency physician, I always knew when I was working and I always knew when I wasn't working. Not like many other physicians where, they had to take call and be on call. I was never on call except for dire emergencies, and that was very rare over the, 25 plus years. But I always knew I'd be working at least 50% of weekend days, and I'd work 2 or 3 evenings a week typically, and I'd work every other holiday. And it really took away the freedom that most people have, the ability to unwind during a weekend. Because, for
Yeah.
example, most industries are closed on the weekend, especially in the financial world. I've been able to structure days now in such a way that it's now my schedule. I am in
Hmm.
control. For example, right now I am training to run the New York Marathon. I've always been a runner. Even at my ripe age in my mid 50s, I've always been a runner and enjoyed it, but I've never really been able to find the time to train well enough to be able to run the marathon the way I want to run a marathon. And I've never run a marathon. I've done some halves. But over the past few months, I finally decided, now that I've set this up over the past few years, over the past few months, I said, I can do this and I can work my training. So over the past few months, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, what run am I doing today? And I look at my schedule, and that's part of my day, even though I'm working some evenings and I still work some weekends. I'm used to doing that, but now it's on my schedule. and I'm
Yeah.
able to create a life where I have the ultimate freedom of being able to do things my way, yet while still allowing for my clients for it to fit into their schedules. A lot of
Right.
clients don't really want to meet during the week, and most financial advisors aren't open during the weekend.
Weekend.
I have no problem doing a call on a Saturday or Sunday if it fits into my schedule. That freedom not only helps me and improves my happiness and life fulfillment, but it helps my clients, and that's great because it's all about them.
Yeah. Well, I'm just waiting for you to pull out your cape, Jeff. You're adding the marathoning to your impressive list of skills and accomplishments. But did you actually? But did you? You came from a very obviously your hours. You said you knew them and you knew when you were when you weren't working. But it's very structured, right? You didn't have. There was a lot of rigidity in terms of when you had to work. So did you actually struggle with the freedom that you had, or did you feel like you just felt like now that I own it, I can structure it?
I think I was so structured for so many years.
Yeah.
This what and listen, this is a danger. I'll talk about this with clients. It's a danger moving into retirement to lose that structure.
Yeah. Have so
Give
much
up
free
your
time.
full-time gig and lose the structure. I had the insight as I slowly assimilated into it to recognize I will savor the freedom and
Right.
the lack of structure. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not disciplined. There are certain times I am all in, but after, so many years of having to follow that structure, it's been such a relief to be able to craft everything my way without losing discipline. But I'd like to say no longer am I bound by that structure, which is
Yeah.
fabulous.
True. And have you built a spreadsheet tool that governs your days?
Oh, I have for the marathon training, which is very interesting.
Okay, that's
Only
good.
for the marathon training, though. But no, I
Good.
mean, I love spreadsheets so much. So I can, you never know. By tomorrow, I might have that spreadsheet. But in general, I'm living off the calendar, and it's very important
Yeah.
to keep that calendar up to date, especially when you're a solo. And that is technology that helps me. But that's really how I structure it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And calendar is actually the secret weapon of a solopreneur. I put in everything I do in my day, even if it's taking, doing laundry, there will be a block there, blocking off the time for laundry because that's otherwise, we're going to be ending up wasting a lot of time unproductively in business and in life.
Right.
So let me ask, what's one financial blind spot you consistently see solopreneurs or small business owners overlook? And how can they fix it before it becomes a crisis?
I think I mentioned it a little bit previously, but it's the idea that you need to wear a whole bunch of different hats.
Yep.
It's not just about the new business and providing a service or products to your customers. It's about running a business.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many different aspects of them. You need to understand the balance sheet. You need to understand, profit and loss statements.
Yeah.
That's the accounting aspects. You need to understand compliance. You need to understand marketing if you're choosing to market. You need to understand client interactions. There are so many different hats. And I think when I entered the industry, I wasn't blind to it. I did go through business school and I knew about this, but it wasn't real when you take courses in business school. And my idea was, oh, I'm going into this to develop relationships with my clients and help them maximize life fulfillment through financial planning without necessarily recognizing, oh, I'm going to be wearing a lot of other hats to be able to make that successful. That was the
Yeah.
blind spot for me.
But in terms of your clients, though, do you see anything they're overlooking? So it sounds like a lot of people don't fully recognize that they may be doing what they love, but they also need to run a business, right? Which means you need to watch your profit and loss, you need to watch your expenses, you need to watch your overheads, you need to sort of figure out all those different things, right? So is that something you've seen with clients too, sort of barreling into like, I'm going to go and do what I love and sort of ignoring some of those things?
So I see it with clients, and
Yeah.
that is probably my biggest challenge with clients is helping them recognize you have enough when that's
Right.
the situation. Listen, I have some clients that do not have enough,
Yeah.
and those are different discussions. But when I have clients that have enough, they want to keep working. Are you happy working? No, but I don't have enough.
That's what I
And
do.
and
Yeah.
the definition of enough is different for different people. But when you map it out and we talk about their goals and where they want to be in 10 and 20 and hopefully 30 years down the line, they often have enough. And the transition of going from saving to spending,
Spending. Yeah.
it's extraordinarily difficult
Right.
to act. And most financial planners won't have you, don't
Spend.
really want you to use up your principal. But that's
Yes.
the goal. That's why you've saved up so much.
Yeah.
Start spending down principal. And that is such a block with nearly every client. They don't want to spend the principal because they've had the goal their whole life is accumulating this money. They don't know how to spend it. And
Yeah.
that requires tact and counseling and multiple discussions. And often we're successful, and sometimes people are not successful with that. And
Yeah.
it potentially is they are not maximizing life fulfillment by not using the money as a tool and recognizing it's time to start spending it to
Yeah.
improve life. Not just spending, for this, that, or the other thing, but with the goal of improving life fulfillment.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's so ingrained in people, right? I mean, I've had to work through this myself, which is like, what is this fictional day and fictional number that I'm waiting for in my bank account to actually start living the way I want to live? And also, once you sort of have that realization, you're like, I can start today. There's nothing stopping me. Like you said, you do it smartly, obviously. You don't go in, go to the casino and put everything on red, which,
Right. No
but
frivolous spending.
yeah, yeah, right.
It's
But
purposeful, meaningful spending.
yeah, but spending is important because that it's all part of, like you said. That's why I love the your tagline or your motto of the intersection of health, wealth, and happiness. Because I think more people need to sort of realize that. And there's an entire cottage industry that tells you the opposite. You got to keep saving, keep saving, keep saving, and don't spend a penny. Right? Saving is good, but spending is also good. So yeah, I think it's a good message for people to hear. So you've invented yourself multiple times now, Jeff. So what would you tell someone who's afraid or feel like they're too old to reinvent themselves professionally?
So I would say you're never too old. I know people well into their 80s that have reinvented themselves, and it may not be necessarily, with a paid job with benefits,
Yeah.
but they've reinvented themselves and figured out, what do I want to do next? And, I know someone that's become a volunteer at a ornithology center locally. And they just want to teach people about birds. They never did it before, but they wanted to learn about birds. And now they teach people about birds as a volunteer. When you're younger and you still need to generate revenue, I think you need to be a little bit more intentional. It's not only about, reinventing yourself with volunteer opportunities, which obviously it's always very important to give back to the community, but it's also very important to first make sure you are secure yourself.
Yeah.
And for those people, I would say that the journey really doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be linear. I mean, for example, I still practice medicine occasionally. I
Yeah.
built the business slowly. I took my time. I learned along the way. And you have to be open to bumps in the road and recognizing challenges and finding ways to deal with those challenges. And it's okay to take small steps. Trust yourself. Focus on the people you're serving. I mean, that mindset has just made all the difference for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. And also, you're right. It doesn't have to be this overnight in reinvention, right? You don't go ta-da, like you said. You can have a plan and you can do it purposefully. And I think that's a smart way to do it. And also, you can do it at your own pace, right? Everyone doesn't have to do it in like 24 hours or a month or a year. You can do it over a period of time. So, but I think the key is doing it. There's so many people get stuck in their own head. I think almost everybody. I had a guest on recently who told me that the graveyard is filled with the greatest ambitions and most brilliant ideas in this world. of people who took it to the grave with them and never acted on it. So I love that advice.
Right. Go for it. You
Yeah.
have an idea, pursue it.
Yeah, because you don't want to wake up regretting not having done something, right? I'd
Right.
rather have a regret having tried something and not, succeeded than
And
never.
unfortunately, in my, as an emergency physician, I have heard those stories.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if we were to meet again 3 years from now, what would you want? Where do you see Dr. Jeff Finance? What would you want to have achieved?
So I think I see it in a similar position. I I do I I want to continue the relationships with the clients. I think as I can handle more clients, I will help. I almost slipped. I almost said treat as many clients as possible while still delivering maximal service. I do not ever see having any additional staff. I will maintain my solo boutique firm, but I see getting out there. I'm not a big writer, but I love to talk with people and have discussions and teaching people. So I kind of see blossoming more into, I'm not saying necessarily a lecture circuit, but I wouldn't mind spreading the word, and social media might be the right avenue to do that, just to help people. Even if I have enough clients at that point and I am not comfortable taking any additional ones, I still want to help as many people as possible with the within the time constraints of being able to deliver maximum value for all of my clients. And again, it's all about life fulfillment and maximizing happiness. And if there's anything I can do for a broader group of people, I will try to do that. And I think social media is probably the way I will make my way into that, although I don't see it on the horizon in the next 1 to 2 years, maybe 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it is. It can, as with most things, it can be a really powerful and good platform, right? That can be used to educate and do a lot of good. And honestly, financial literacy is an issue in this country. I've talked to so many people about this, and so I think there's real value in helping people understand even the small things that may seem very small and obvious to you aren't to most people, right? So I think there's definitely value to that. So I look forward to seeing Dr. Jeff Finance on TikTok, along with maybe the marathon and dance videos that accompany it.
We'll
So,
see.
so, and you've sort of touched on this when I asked you about the reinvention, but I always ask this question: if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody who wants to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
That's a great question. I could tell them a whole bunch of different things. I think the one thing I would tell them, it all comes back to maximizing happiness and
Yeah,
life fulfillment. Protect your schedule and build flexibility into your work so you can be your best self.
yeah,
And your business should not run your life. It's the other way around. Your life should, your business should fit into your life. Your life should not be controlled by your business. And when you're starting up a solo firm and running a solo firm, that is a dangerous trap, that the business runs your life. And I would say be careful about that.
yeah. No, I think that's excellent advice, because all you're doing, if you end up in that boat, is you're trading one pair of handcuffs from the corporate world for another set of handcuffs, right? You haven't really changed anything if if you become a slave to your business again. So now I think that's really good advice. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered, Jeff?
I think and we've covered it, but I'll reemphasize it. Focus on happiness,
Yeah.
your own happiness and happiness of your clients, focusing on delivering value to your clients and your customers. And just make sure you're doing everything you can do individually to maximize life fulfillment and master the intersection of wealth, health, and happiness.
Well, for someone who's not on social media, you put that together really well. So
Thank you.
that takes us to our rapid fire round. You ready?
I'm
All right.
ready.
Favorite thing about working the pizza truck that you still think about today?
It placed me into a unique zone because it was so busy and so demanding. It's not
Okay.
life and death like in an emergency department, but it taught me the environment where you just focus on that one task and just cranking out the French bread pizzas. And it was so wonderful to be able to go to that job for a few hours, once or twice a week, and completely forget about everything else that's going on in life.
Well, I can tell you it might be more dangerous than an emergency room, having been a 4 a.m. hangry person going to get their hangover fix.
There
So,
you
yeah,
go. And there were a lot of difficult people to be dealing with, but it was a fun experience.
I'm sure. Worst financial advice you see people following on social media?
Purchasing products that are sold to them that are not products that they should purchase, typically due to commissions or fees that will not help the client.
Okay. And we used to have an old saying in advertising, which is selling people things they don't need with money they don't have. Right? It's like the old saying.
Well
If
stated.
if your clients had to describe you in one word, what do you think they'd say?
Enthusiastic.
Love it. So if you had to create a tagline for your own life, what would it be?
Maximize happiness while helping as many people as possible.
What's the most non-financial skill that makes you a better financial advisor?
Uh, I would say diligence and focus.
Okay. So now you've done taxes since you were a teenager, right? Working with your dad. What's the most ridiculous tax deduction someone has tried to claim with you?
I'm not going there.
I think that says it all.
I have to be truthful. I can't go there.
Okay.
But they did not claim it.
I like the answers that are left to people's imagination. We might keep that one. If you could grab a cup of coffee with your 25-year-old doctor self, what's the one thing you'd tell him about your current career path?
Pursue your dreams and don't
Lo-
let life become stagnant.
Love it. Well, Jeff, that was a lot of fun. That brings us to the end of our show. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey, and all the wisdom that you've provided today.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure, Nikhil. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope my stories have helped others. That's the goal.
I'm sure they will. What strikes me most about Jeff's story is something I see with the most successful solopreneurs I work with. He was already doing the work before he ever charged for it. Think about that for a moment. While he was working full time in the ER, he was opening Excel spreadsheets to unwind. He was answering colleagues' financial questions between patients. He wasn't just dreaming about a business, he was living it, testing it, and refining his expertise long before he hung out his shingle. Second, don't confuse passion with impulsiveness. Jeff didn't jump off a cliff. He built his cushion, tested his model, and moved slowly into full time solopreneurship. That's not playing it safe, that's playing it smart. Because the solopreneurs who last aren't the ones who make the dramatic leap. They're the ones who build their runway while they're still employed, who use their paycheck as venture capital, and who give themselves permission to grow at a pace that actually works. My third takeaway is this: your lived experience is your unfair advantage if you know how to use it. Jeff didn't just become a financial planner, he brought his physician's lens to the work and created something entirely different. That intersection of wealth, health, and happiness isn't a clever tagline he brainstormed with a consultant. It's the natural result of 25 years spent treating patients in life and death situations, combined with a lifelong passion for personal finance. The question for you is: what part of your past gives you an edge in your present? What insight, skill, or story could become the foundation of your solo brand? Because the most powerful positioning isn't about being better, it's about being the only. And my final takeaway is about structure and freedom, because Jeff proved you can have both. After decades of working nights, weekends, and holidays in the ER, he didn't just crave flexibility, he designed for it. But here's the part most people miss: he didn't swap structure for chaos, he replaced obligation with intention. He traded the rigidity of hospital schedules for a rhythm that serves his values. Now he can train for a marathon in the mornings, meet with clients on weekends if it serves them, and design his days around what actually matters. So here's my challenge to you this week. Audit your schedule. Take a hard look at where your time goes and ask yourself, does this align with the life I want? If the answer is no, make one small shift today, because your business should fit your life, not the other way around. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you're feeling stuck about how to position your expertise or struggling to connect your story to a clear brand that attracts clients, let's fix that. I'm offering a free 30-minute brand clarity session to help you spot what might be missing and get clear on your next move. You can book your session at clarity.boostsolo.com or just use the link in the show notes. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.